The air inside the dojo was thick with the rhythm of exertion. Shoes lined up neatly by the wall, the soft scent of tatami mats mixed with a faint trace of disinfectant and human effort. Shafts of sunlight streamed through the high windows, catching the swirling dust in golden specks. You could hear the sounds of impact, the dull, rhythmic thud of bodies hitting mats, blending with short bursts of breath and the slap of bare feet pivoting for position. Emma stood just outside the sparring circle, adjusting the knot of her brown belt with careful precision. She tried to focus on the familiar ritual, wrap, cross, pull tight, but her fingers trembled just enough to betray the storm inside. Across from her, Damien, the gym's black belt star, was already watching her with a half smirk, like a chess player who knew how the match would end before the first move was made. Damien had the kind of frame that made people take a step back without realizing it. Broad shoulders, solid jaw, eyes that scanned you like he was already breaking down your defenses. His record in competition was spotless here, and his reputation outside the gym made him something of a local legend. And when he'd spoken earlier that day, he hadn't whispered it. "You're not ready for me," he'd said, in front of the whole class. "You're too weak." That word, weak, was still hanging in the air hours later, clinging to her ribs like smoke. The class gathered closer now, sensing the electricity in the room. Some wore expressions of eager curiosity, others mild pity. No one expected Emma to win. Some didn't even expect her to last a minute. But Emma wasn't thinking about winning. She was thinking about surviving the first few seconds. Before we dive into what happened on that mat, let me pause for just a heartbeat. If stories like this, stories of grit, resilience, and that deep, stubborn fire inside people, are the kind you live for, then you'll feel at home here. Subscribe to Soul Touch Stories so you don't miss the moments that remind us all of what's possible, even when no one else believes. Coach's voice broke through her thoughts. "Ready?" Damien nodded. Emma gave a small nod in return. "Begin." In an instant, Damien exploded forward, his black GI blurring with the speed of his movement. His right hand shot toward her collar, his left seeking control of her sleeve. His plan was clear: break her balance, impose his strength before she could set her stance. And Emma, let him. She let his hand grip the collar. She let the weight of his forward momentum pull her in. And in that moment, everything slowed. She saw his feet planted too wide, the slight opening in his posture. She turned her hips sharply, her left leg slicing upward, her calf locking across the back of his neck. The chatter in the room died mid-sentence. Her right leg snapped into position, ankle hooked over her left shin, triangle choke. 4 seconds. Damien's eyes widened. He tried to posture up, his core straining, but Emma shifted her hips, angling her body just so, cutting off his air and blood flow with clinical precision. Her calves and thighs burned, but she held the lock like iron. 9 seconds. The sound came faintly at first, a tapping on her thigh. Once. Twice. 14 seconds. Coach's whistle sliced the air. Stop. Damien rolled to his side, catching his breath, the flush in his cheeks betraying his embarrassment. The room erupted, not in cheers exactly, but in a shocked hum, the kind of sound people make when they've just seen something they didn't think was possible. Emma released her grip and sat back on her heels, chest rising and falling, eyes fixed on the mat. No smile. No raised fists. She simply reached down, untied her belt, and retied it with calm precision. Inside, however, something shifted. Not a triumphant roar, more like the quiet click of a lock finally opening. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to go back years earlier, to a smaller gym on the other side of town. Emma had started jiu-jitsu for one reason: survival. Her father had left when she was 11. Her mother, exhausted from double shifts at a diner, had little energy left at the end of each day. School had been its own battlefield, whispered insults in the hallway, slammed lockers, books stolen from her desk. And that word again, weak, had been written in permanent marker across her reputation. She'd walked into her first class wearing a borrowed white GI, the sleeves a little too long. Her first roll ended in seconds, pinned, gasping, cheeks red with humiliation. But there had been something in that moment, lying on the mat with her opponent's weight pressing her down, that sparked a strange thought: if I can learn to get up here, I can get up anywhere. So she came back. Again and again. She drilled the same escape hundreds of times. She stayed after class when everyone else was gone, practicing guard transitions in the quiet hum of the empty gym. There were no cameras, no applause, just the sound of her breathing and the slap of her back hitting the mat. Her knuckles toughened, her grip strengthened, but more than that, her patience grew razor sharp. Her first competition ended in a loss under a minute. The sting of it sat heavy, but instead of quitting, she went home, watched the footage frame by frame, writing down every mistake. She wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong yet, she was just building a foundation no one could see. Back in the present, after the match with Damien, she walked to the locker room, eyes on the floor. She could feel the glances following her, but no one spoke. She knew what they were thinking, maybe strength wasn't what they thought it was. Coach found her later, still sitting on the bench, staring at her belt. "You know," he said, "there's something more dangerous than a strong fighter." She looked up. "What's that?" "A patient one." That night, she walked home under the orange glow of street lamps, the air cool and crisp against her skin. She thought about all the times she'd been told she wasn't enough, not just in jiu-jitsu, but in life. And she realized something: she never needed to fight to prove them wrong. She just needed to keep showing up until the truth spoke for itself. Weeks later, the story of that 14-second submission had traveled far. New students walked in saying they'd heard about the brown belt who tapped a black belt in seconds. Emma said nothing, simply bowing on the mat and starting her warm-up like always. Because she knew this wasn't the end. There would be bigger challenges ahead, stronger opponents, moments where she'd be tested again. Victories faded, but the person she was becoming, that stayed. So if you're here right now, listening, and you've ever been told you're too weak, too small, too late, don't take it as truth. Take it as a challenge. And if stories like Emma's light something inside you, like they do for me, make sure you like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Soul Touch Stories. There's more in you than you realize. Months later, Emma rolled with Damien again. This time, there was no smirk on his face. He bowed, and they began a slower, more measured exchange. They fought for grips, traded sweeps, battled through scrambles. It was exhausting, neither giving an inch easily. When it ended, sweat poured down both their faces. Damien extended his hand. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for," he said. Emma's eyes held his, steady. "I was always strong. You just couldn't see it." And maybe that's the truth for all of us: strength isn't always loud or visible. Sometimes, it grows in silence, in repetition, in the simple act of not giving up when it would be easier to walk away. Sometimes, it takes 14 seconds to show the world what took years to build.